you're talking about creating opportunities from a business point of view. How do you see the world, or this vegan world, combined with business opportunities? How do you see these two different worlds?
Yeah. Well, I think that the way we relate to the earth and the way that business has been conducted has been a very extractive relationship and a very extractive attitude. In the case of animal agriculture, we see the animals as commodities who we raise and we slaughter. We take their lives so that we can eat their flesh. And this is, I don't think, a healthy interaction. It is not, I don't think, a sustainable business model. So I think we need to start creating business models where we are growing food without extracting from the land, but living in a way that is more sustainable. And at this point, I think it has to be regenerative, because we need to heal much of the earth that we have harmed. And so I think farm sanctuaries can actually play a role in creating a new plant-based farming economy. One of the biggest obstacles for people who are farmers is access to land, especially for young and upcoming farmers. And sanctuaries have land. So some of that land can be used for these young, upcoming farmers. And in the case of older farmers, or farms that have been in families for generations, those farms, instead of raising animals, can start shifting, perhaps to become sanctuaries, and then transition from sanctuaries into vegan farms that also have other aspects, such as wellness, hospitality. They could do yoga retreats. They could also host events. They could do executive retreats. They could do weddings. They could do farm-to-table events. They could do pick your own for your own food. They could have orchards. They could do value-added products. Or if you have an apple orchard, for example, you could do apple cider, or if you grew, there's so many different opportunities. You could have a pumpkin patch. People could come there. You could do celebrations. You could have music. You could have art. And it's really, how do we live on the planet? Do we live in a way that is kind and respectful and with appreciation? Or do we live in a way that is extractive and violent and without empathy? And so to me, I think most people would rather live in a way that is connected and is kind and is mutually beneficial. And we can create those types of experiences at sanctuaries. And I think farms that are currently exploiting and hurting other animals can transition away from that to create similar places with similar compassionate, connected experiences. Well, change is scary. And for people who are making a living doing a certain thing, the idea of not being able to make a living doing that thing can be frightening. But my goal is not to put down farmers. My goal is not to scare farmers. I am not anti-farmer. I am anti-cruelty. And I actually think most farmers are also anti-cruelty. So to me, it's about finding the common ground and building from there. And change happens over time. It's a long process. And for me, it's also been a process. When I was younger, I was much less sympathetic to farmers. But I think now it's important to love the sinner, hate the sin, right? And recognize that good people do bad things. And also recognize that even the most vegan is not perfect. Nobody is perfect. So humility is a very important quality, I think. But also conviction and passion and believing in something. So you need to be humble, I think, but you also need to see things as they are and say what you see and speak the truth. And, sometimes people are doing things that are violent and cruel and causing unnecessary suffering, and we need to say that. But just because somebody is doing something doesn't mean that they are cruel. So the behavior and the person are, the person doesn't have to do bad things. And I think they would rather not do bad things, but they don't necessarily know that there are opportunities outside of that. And so we grow up with habits. We grow up believing certain things are normal. And as time goes, we can hopefully step back and examine our behavior, critically evaluate our conduct, and decide if it makes sense or not. And by that I mean, does it make sense for us in terms of our health? Does it make sense in terms of our physical as well as our emotional health? Because I would argue that treating animals cruelly undermines our empathy and our humanity and our emotional health. Does killing animals the way we do in our food system benefit the earth? And the answer is obviously it doesn't. It hurts other animals, including wild animals, because to raise animals for food, we're using enormous quantities of land to graze livestock or to grow crops to feed farm animals. So this is a system that is horrendous for animals, for the earth, and ourselves. And I think when we step back and look at it critically, that becomes pretty obvious. And for farmers, that's frightening because they then are faced with this conflict between self-worth and purpose and doing something positive in the world, which actually is causing enormous harm to the world. And I think most people want to do something positive for the world. So that is, for many, a very challenging thing to face. And I was not a farmer, so for me it was easier to make this sort of transition emotionally and just from a livelihood standpoint. But for farmers it's tough, and I understand that. And that's why I think it's so important to create opportunities and pathways out of this abusive animal agriculture system into a more mutually beneficial relationship with the earth and other animals and into plant-based agriculture.
Is information enough to change behaviors?
I don't think information is enough to change behaviors in most cases. I think information is necessary, but you also, I think, need infrastructures and you need systems, socioeconomic systems, structures. Right now our food system is this massive machine that is underpinned by government programs and university programs and government subsidies. And those need to shift away from supporting this exploitive, wasteful system to enable a new kind of system to arise. And in many cases, the current machine that's in place doesn't want change because there are some individuals that are making a lot of money in that system. So they have a very strong incentive to not look very closely at the problems with that system. And that's, I think, the role of activist groups to say, wait a second, what are we doing? Is it okay? And to speak to people in agribusiness who are profiting, who probably want to keep profiting and not think very much about it, and to make the case to them that they can profit by plant-based agriculture, while also speaking with consumers and citizens who are purchasing products and creating the demand for this abusive system, and speaking with consumers and saying, look, vote with your dollars, vote with your conscience, and do not support a system that is not aligned with your own compassionate values and that is not aligned with your own interests. Because the way most people today in the United States live is not aligned with their values. When they think about factory farms and slaughterhouses, people are upset. And they often say, don't tell me, it's too upsetting. That shows that they have a conscience that they're not living according to. And also in the United States and other countries where we eat a lot of meat, people are eating food that makes themselves sick. We have heart disease and other problems that could be prevented or at least reduced by eating plants instead of animals. So eating this way is not in our interest. And then animal agriculture is destroying the planet. That's also not in our interest. So if people would just sort of step back, critically evaluate their food choices and the consequences of those food choices, and then if people wanted to live in a way that was aligned with their own values and their own interests, we would see a revolution in the food system. So information is part of it, but we need the structures to make it possible.
When you say people, you're talking about a group, you're talking about an individual. Who actually can make a difference?
Everybody can make a difference. By people, I'm talking about individuals, and I'm talking about societies, I'm talking about families. Each of us every day makes a difference by the choices we make. And when it comes to food, by choosing to eat plants instead of animals, we're voting for a different kind of food system.